Okay, so in this one we're going to look at the average function, and to do so we need a large number of numbers just to analyze the data. And I've provided you with a file which you should now have within your Excel lessons area, one called 1 million numbers, and it's actually just over 1 million. It's enough to populate my entire sheet plus one. So you should, when you import this, you might get an error message, you might not. And if you don't get an error message, it doesn't matter. But in the case of what I'm going to be doing, it will generate the error message because I want you to see what you might get when you try to load too much data. It doesn't matter if we try to load too much data in this case. The other thing to remember with this is I'm going to be using the latest import wizard, obviously, and not the legacy. But now we've got our head around that. Hopefully that works. So what I'm going to do is going to go to get data from file, from text. I'm going to double click on the 1 million. There's the data, perfectly happy with it. And I'm simply going to tell it to load. Here's the error message. And all it's telling me is that there's too much data to fit onto the worksheet. Actually, in my case, there's one piece of data too great, and that's fine. It's just going to populate the entire row. If I wanted to pull all the data in, then I'd need to tell it where to start running from. And that requires us to use the transformation wizard and to reanalyze how we do things. But that's not for us to do at this stage. So we're going to simply click on OK, and it's going to complete that journey. Now, if you've got the latest version, you'll notice over here that I've tried this before, and the same error message is happening there. So Excel's really helpful at giving us information about what we've looked at, just to see what we've got. But I'm simply going to close down that part there. It's also beautifully colored this in. I don't need the colors, so I'm going to change the table style and remove them. And I don't want this first row. So all I need to do is look for the new menu that's appeared, which is called Table Design. That's the one that offered me this option here. And then look for the one that says Header Row. If I take the tick out of Header Row, it no longer appears. I can now click and right click on there, choose Delete, and everything shifts up one. And that's helpful for us. The average tool is really simple. All I need to do is push equals to tell Excel it's going to be doing some work, type in the word average, and you'll see a range of average tools. And we're not going to look at all of these, but they are available to us. Obviously, I can use the arrow keys, by the way, to step through and have a read of them. But what we're going to do instead is stick to the standard average. I'm going to open up the brackets, and then all I'm going to do is click on column A. I'm then going to close the bracket and press enter, and it tells me the average. Now, if you remember from your school mathematics, this is an odd number considering that none of the numbers in here are fractional numbers. None of them have a decimal part. These are all integers. Everything in this column, believe me, are all integers. And yet the answer is that. And that's because what we've got is the mean average. Now, let's have a brief look at the mean average. So the mean average is quite a simple one to calculate, but it's probably the most mathematical of them all. The mean average is always defined as the sum total of all values divided by the number of values. So let's take some values. Let's take 4, 8, 10. So there are 3 numbers. And if we take 4 plus 8 plus 10, then we've got 10 plus 8, which is 18, plus 4, so that gives us 22. So the calculation for the mean average is nothing more than the number of numbers, the sum of all numbers divided by the number of numbers. So we've got there the 22, and we're dividing that by the 3. 3's going to 22. Well, 3's going to 21 precisely. So that gives us 7, and we're left with 1 left over. So 7 and 1 still to be divided by 3. Or if we want to put that as a decimal, it's 7.3 with the 3 recurring forever. The dot simply means there's a 3, then a 3, then a 3, then a 3, then a 3, and goes on forever and ever. So we can see straight away that our mean average is not one of our numbers. 7.3 does not appear out of the 3 numbers we've got. It's somewhere between. The mean average is also the one that is most mathematical in the way it's been calculated. So when we see the word average in Excel, it means the mean average. And that's important to remember. It's one type of average. So let's see how that works within Excel. So what Excel has done here is taken the average, the mean average of all of the numbers here. So what it's done is it's taken all of these numbers. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the CTRL, the control key. Now you've got 2 of those on your keyboard, mentioned these before. 1 at the bottom left-hand corner and 1 just below your enter. You've got a shift and then a CTRL key. So you've got 2 of them. Now you can hold, I often use the left-hand one, and then we're going to use the down arrow key. But with one hand, you can hold down the right-hand one, and then just while you're holding it down, tap the down arrow key. And because I'm in that row, it will take me to the end of the data, which happens to be almost at the end of the sheet. So there are 1,048,575 numbers there. So what Excel is doing is summing up, adding up all those numbers together and then dividing that by the total number of numbers. Just to give you an idea of that, I could do the average a slightly different way. I could do the sum of the entire column of A. So adding all those numbers together. Then what I could do is I could take that and divide that by 1,048,575, and I should get 500.468. Now again, to go to the top, I'm going to click there, control and then the up arrow, but let's just remember 500.46875. Go up to the top, 46875. It's the same number. So all it's doing is doing those 2 steps there, summing up the entire column and then dividing by the number of numbers. Now, another way to use that we've already seen before is if I say equals the sum of all of those all of that column, and then divide that by the count of all of those. So add up how many numbers are in that column, and I get exactly the same number. So mean average is nothing more than the sum of that entire column, that plus that plus that plus that plus that plus blah, 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 divided by how many numbers there are. And it's a useful average. But as we saw in the example I gave, it can be altered quite significantly by low numbers. Let's do another example. So imagine that I've got a set of numbers. Let's do some low ones, then bring in some nice middle numbers. So let's have a look at the average of those. So if I equal average and then I pull these across, the average of those 9.1. Now let's put a really extreme number. Let's put our number of cells in there. Now, obviously I haven't included that here, but I'm going to do it underneath. Equals the average of all of those again, plus that one. Now notice that. Notice how this one number has altered the mean average massively in such a huge way. And that's the thing about the mean average, is it's easily skewed. That's the flash word for it, skewed. Just to use that word, skewed. That means twisted away from what would be a nice distribution with a nice average smack in the middle. It's being pulled away. It's being moved. So let's look at that in context with something we can comprehend. Let's suggest that we've got a few people that are earning, and I'm going to use relatively nice straight. I'll try and randomize the numbers a little bit more. So what we do is we go through some nice salaries. Let's go up to 29.8, so things like that. 31. Oops, go back. I've got too many numbers on that one. 31. So like that, and I shouldn't have put the commas in, that's going to complain, but it has recognized those as numbers, so I don't have a problem with that. We'll put a couple more in. 32. Got to stop putting spaces in, that's what I keep hitting the space bar without thinking about it. Across to there. 41, and just one more. 42. So there's a range of numbers. Let's now put those as currency. So let's give these the pound symbol, just because I'm in the United Kingdom, but it doesn't make any difference where they are. And those are around about. Let's have a look what the average income is between this group. 26,125, not far off the national average income within the United Kingdom. It is off, but not wildly off. And if you take another average, that's actually really close. By accident, I will point that out, by accident, it's not far from another calculation of the average of the income within the United Kingdom. But now let's put in an extreme example. Let's put just 1,987,780, just for the hell of it. Now that little green marker, by the way, is telling us that it's not taking all the numbers into consideration. And usually what I'd do is I'd go there and say, oh yeah, okay, update to include, but we want to see what difference this makes. So again, I'm going to do what we did before, and I'm simply going to go there. Now that has changed. I need to put the pound sign on there, otherwise it doesn't look very good, but there you go. That has hugely changed that average. In fact, we could lose the million in there quite happily, and it's massively changed the average. So this data is skewed. If I said to you, I've got this group of people here. Now, a nice thing I can do, by the way, there's a little trick with these. I'm going to draw your attention to the status bar. The status bar is always this bottom bar of every program. If a program's got a status bar, it's going to appear there. Tells me it's ready to do calculations, so it's not busy doing something. But look along here. It gives me the average because that's really common for people to see, and that's exactly the number we've got there. Count. It tells me how many cells I've selected, and then it's showing me the sum total of those. So if I look, I've got 11 items there, 11 incomes. And if I said to you, look, I've got 11 people here. These are the salaries. What do you think the average is? You'd probably go, well, they've got to be somewhere between those. You wouldn't say £113,000, because you'd go, well, no, hold on. 10 of the 11 aren't earning anything near £111,000. So to say the average income of this group is 111,000, and that's the thing with the mean average. It is skewed. It is heavily dependent upon any extremes. This is so wildly to the side that actually it distorts the overall picture. And usually in the United Kingdom, when they talk about average income, they are usually talking about mean average. And in the United Kingdom, that's defined usually around about £30,000 per person. But the other average is 26. And there's a difference of £4,000 a year. And that shows that the data, the mean average, is being skewed by very high values at the upper end. So a small number of people earning very high salaries will shift that mean average away from the center towards the edge. So the mean average is useful, but it's not the only average. And that's something that it would have been nice if Excel had called this mean, but they called it average. And that's the misuse of the language. But that's a mathematical campaign that I'm going to lead one day, but not now. We're just looking at Excel. But let's have a look at another average called the median average. And we're going to look at that next. See you then. So in this lesson, we're going to have a look at the median average. And again, I use that term from the mathematical point of view. So the average calculation that we use, and you can see at the moment, the average calculation in Excel is actually called the mean average. But there is another one which is called the median average. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the tab, move or copy, create a copy, and scroll right to the end and click OK. That's then going to create the copy of the sheet. I'm then going to double click on the name, remove the part that says average and simply put median, and just remove the 2. The reason for copying, and I'm not going to delete everything on here, the reason for copying that is because I want to see how that relates to the mean average. So the median is really simple. The median is where we take all of the numbers, we put them into order, and then we find the middle value. Now, let's have a look at that a little bit closer. So let's take a series of numbers, nothing too horrendous. Let's just take a series of numbers. I'm trying not to keep them in a nice pretty sequence. So let's go for those, and we'll just let's add an extreme in many ways. That's 290. Now, we know that in a mean average, that's going to skew the numbers. So how many numbers have we got? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the number of numbers equals 7. Now, the sum total of those numbers, so the sum of those numbers is 335. And I haven't done that quickly in my head. I actually just calculated that number elsewhere. So I can work out the mean average, which is nothing more than 335 divided by 7. And I can do a little bit of a calculation without doing anything too horrendous by just using this to calculate that. So 7s don't go into 3, but 7s do go into 33, and they go 4 times, which is 28. That leaves another 5. So 7s go into 55. Well, they go into 49 quite neatly. So we're looking at 7 times, and we're left with a 6 left over. Now, if it goes into 49 7 times, then it must be 56, which is 8 times, and we're left with 4 left over. And that's going to be 5. So 7s into 40 go 5, with 5 left over. And I'm going to stop there. 40 roughly. So the mean average is approximately, that's what those squiggly equal signs means, 47.85. And we can see again that this mean average has no real relationship to these numbers here. If I was going to be asked the average, I wouldn't say, oh, it's got to shift, but that's because of the way the mean average works. So what about the median average? Well, the median average doesn't have any calculation. As such, all we do is we make sure that the numbers are in order. So it's really important that the numbers must be in order. And then all you do is you find the middle one. Well, 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. So there's 3 there. And if I go 3 that way, 3.5, that gets me there. That's the halfway point. So there's an equal number this way as there are that way. So my mean average is 8. Look at the difference there. That's huge. The median average takes into consideration only the middle value, so it's not affected by any higher or lower value. So that's a nice average to get. So let's see how that relates to our numbers that we're using in Excel. So what we've now got here is we've still got the average here, but to get the median average in Excel, we don't need the numbers in order. If I push equals median open brackets, median, not media, and you can see it comes up. So I know I've got it right. I'm going to open the brackets up and it tells me what I need. And it says number 1, but I don't have to click on each one. I can simply select the column and then close the brackets and off it will go. Now, if the median needs them in order, then how come Excel doesn't? Well, that's because Excel puts them in order. That's why it takes median a little bit longer to calculate. But look at that median. That median is 501, which is not far off the 500.468 that we got from the mean average. What that tells us is that these numbers that I've got here aren't that wildly distributed, that they are roughly around equal either side of 501, that there's equally low numbers below 501. There's no wild extremes there any more than there are above 501. And that's a really useful thing. So knowing both averages is really useful. And what about our extremes here? Well, let's have a look at that. I'm going to get rid of the word skewed. And let's now use the median, but only for this first group here. Same thing that we've got there. We get 6.5. Well, that's, again, very different to there. But now let's look at the median for all of these. So one more, but one very high value at the top end. We get 7. 6.5 because it fell between these two. We got 11 numbers. I took 10. 10 divided by 2 gives us 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if we look the other side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 would come between the halfway point to have an equal number either side. We've got 5 there and 5 there, so we must go halfway between these two. So we can still get a fractional response, but it's usually 0.5 or whatever numbers we're using. It's a small difference. It will fall between those two numbers there. Once we add 11, then we can have 5 either side and 7 is left over. But there's no massive extreme there. We've added one more number, so the median average has altered slightly, but we don't get affected by the extremes. And again, in this case, we could look at these and go, okay, well, when we add the additional numbers in, we don't see anything considerably change, but with the mean average we do. So the new numbers included must be extreme values, either very large numbers, a few small, very large numbers, or a lot of slightly higher numbers than we're seeing elsewhere. And obviously this is a huge number, so they've got to be certainly near 90. They've got to be above 95,000, and there could be hundreds of them above 95,000, or just one of them that's a hell of a lot higher than 95,000. If we look here, we can do that again. Equals. If we take out our 10 original people, oh, I didn't put median, so I've got to delete that and then put median, select the whole group and close the brackets. We get 30,562. That's actually lower than that because it's midway between those two. This has been affected by quite low values this side. If you look, those ones there are quite a lot lower and not so far away from this one here. But here, this one is just between those two values there. It's the halfway point. If we took those two values and added them together and divided by 2, we'd end up with that number there. If I now take into consideration the median of all 11 numbers, I should get actually 31,234, because that's exactly halfway. And I certainly get 31,234. But again, the extreme doesn't affect it. So the nice thing about using Excel to calculate median averages is that we don't have to put them in order. I have here, and I have done so here, but Excel didn't have to do it for the 1,048,575 other numbers that are all here. Sad that I've remembered that number. It puts them in order, but the more numbers it puts into order, the longer it's going to take to calculate the median average. So we've now got two averages. We've got one called average, which is the mean average, and we've got one called the median, which is again another average, but is called median in Excel. There is a third one, and you might remember it from school, and that is the most common one. Not most common in use, but that's what it's about. We're going to look at that in the next lesson. We're going to be looking at the mode. See you in the next lesson.